Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Halo Chronicle. Today's video is the first of my character profile series. Today's subject is Faber of Will and Might, aka the Master Builder. The Master Builder is one of the most polarizing figures in the history of the Forerunners. His arrogance and lust for power led to many of the events that caused the fall of the Forerunners, but his strategic vision and planning also saved the galaxy from being completely consumed by the Flood. I'm very excited to cover the life of this tortured Forerunner. With that being said, let's jump into it. We know little about the origins of Faber of Will and Might, but what we do know was that he was a part of a wealthy Forerunner builder clan. He was groomed for high office early in his life. Along with this, we know that sometime around the start of the Human-Forerunner War, he was promoted to Master Builder, which is the highest rank a builder can receive. About 107,000 years before the start of the events in Halo Combat Evolved, an ancient version of humanity pushed their way into Forerunner-controlled space. These ancient humans began bombarding worlds that contained resettled Forerunner species. This triggered a conflict that would later be known as the Human-Forerunner War. Little was known why humanity was doing this at the time, but they were brutal and successful in their conquest to overtake Forerunner-controlled space. These barbaric acts led to several prominent Forerunners presenting cases to the Council to declare war. The three most prominent figures that would seek to declare war on humanity would be Faber, the Master Builder, the Didact, who led the Warrior Servants, and the Librarian, also known as the Life Shaper, who led the Life Worker rate. Eventually, their pleas would be granted, and an all-out war against humanity and the Forerunners would take place. The Didact would be responsible for coordinating the Forerunner military efforts. He would find a great ally in the Master Builder. The Master Builder's responsibilities would be to provide supplies to help the war effort. He would come up with plans for the construction of thousands of ships, weapons, and vehicles the Forerunners would use to quell this threat. The Didact and the Master Builder had a great working relationship during this time of great turmoil. The Didact and Faber would even work on joint projects together. One such project would lead to the creation of a new class of artificial intelligence. This class would be called the Contender class. This artificial intelligence would be so sophisticated that it could coordinate the defense of the entire ecumene. The first ancilla to be made in this class would be called Mendicant Bias. Faber excelled in his role. In fact, he over-delivered on many of his contracts. This helped the Forerunners with their fighting efforts, but it also had a great personal impact on Faber. His builder clan would gain a substantial amount of wealth. This wealth, in time, would corrupt Faber and change him from a loyal ally into a manipulative politician. In time, the Didact's forces would push humanity back to their capital world of Jerome Hakor. After a 50-year-long siege, the Forerunner forces finally broke through humanity's lines and gained control of the planet. It was at this time that the Forerunners would come to know of another threat. While campaigning against the humans, the Forerunners discovered the existence of a fast-growing and wide-spreading parasite. The humans initially called it the Shaping Sickness, but after a time of great expansion, it became known as the Flood. To the surprise of the Forerunners, the Flood began receding as humanity's efforts began to fail. It was as if the Flood was sensitive to humanity's change in fortune. It would be discovered that the reason that humanity pushed into Forerunner territory in the first place was to flee this ever-growing parasite. To compound things, the Forerunners found large-scale populations of humans living and thriving in flood-infested parts of the galaxy. This seemed to imply that humanity had found some sort of a cure or immunity from the Flood. The Forerunners, led by the Didact, began a quick and decisive campaign to eradicate all remaining traces of the Flood, and were largely successful. They were even able to gather intact specimens for later study. Though this campaign was successful, some residues of the Flood were able to escape and flee the galaxy entirely. After quelling humanity and what was left of the flood, the Forerunners had very difficult decisions to make on the fate of their fallen foes. The Builders, including the Master Builder himself, pushed for the complete extermination of humanity. The Warrior Servants saw humanity as a great threat, but saw no honor in exterminating their fallen foe. The Lifeworkers, led by the Librarian, would push for leniency. They believed that humanity was acting in the best interest of the galaxy, though their methods were misguided. A political battle would ensue, and at the heart of it would be the Master Builder. Faber would use the vast amount of wealth accumulated during the war to corrupt and buy off many Forerunner counselors and juridical agents. This, in a sense, made the Builders more politically powerful than any other race in Forerunner society. The Master Builder would be seen as their leader, and as such would be the most powerful Forerunner. But even with all this newfound power, the Builders knew that they had to reach a compromise to maintain order. During their research on the Flood, the Lifeworkers would find that the parasite was so contagious that it could have easily overwhelmed the galaxy, and could do so if given a second chance. Knowing that the parasite could one day return, and knowing that humanity may have found some sort of a cure, the Lifeworkers would push for leniency in an effort to save humanity. In the end, an agreement between the Builders and the Lifeworkers was reached. Humanity would not be exterminated, but they would receive what was seen as a far worse punishment. The human leaders of Cherome Hakor would be subjected to a composer, a device that would break down living consciousness into digital essences. These essences could then be subjected to rope interrogations until the secrets of the Flood cure were discovered, but this would not be their only punishment. The other remaining populations of humans were forcefully devolved into primitive beings. Their genetic advancement would be played backwards and reduced. They were once the second strongest fighting force in the galaxy. After, they were hollow shells of their former selves. To punish the Lifeworkers for defying the Builders during this great debate, the Builders, led by the Master Builder, would order that the Lifeworkers would inflict this punishment onto humanity. After deciding humanity's fate, another great debate would begin in the Forerunner political realm. With the knowledge of the Flood came the fear of their return. A plan must be made in case a cure for the Flood could not be found and the parasite returned with a vengeance. The first plan would be put forward by Faber. He would call for the creation of an array of ultimate weapons of last resort. This array would eventually become known as the Halo Array. This weapon array could destroy all intelligent life in the galaxy and thus eliminate any life that the Flood could use to sustain itself. The proposal of this plan would cause a major rift in the partnership between the Didact and the Master Builder. The Didact vehemently opposed the Master Builder's plans and called it blasphemy against the mantle of responsibility. The Didact believed that the Forerunners had the duty to uphold the mantle and protect all life in the galaxy. He stated that this plan doesn't protect all life and thus would violate the mantle. He would later call the Halo Array an abomination. To counter the Master Builder, the Didact came up with his own plan. He would call for the creation of hundreds of shield worlds. These shield worlds could protect imperiled species from the Flood's advance. It could also give the Forerunners a stronghold to coordinate defense. To protect and preserve as much life as possible, the Didact would seek out the leader of the Lifeworkers, the Librarian, his wife. She would design habitats and sanctuaries for these imperiled species. As the main focus of the Didact's plan would be to protect life, it would uphold the principles of the mantle that the Forerunners held in high regard. Seeing the flaws in his plan, Faber would amend his proposal. He too would seek the assistance of the Librarian. Faber would use her political ideals against her. He called for the construction of genetic libraries and sanctuaries that would be stationed on each Halo, as well as the Halo's central forging location known as the Ark. If the Librarian truly believed that preservation of life was key to this current crisis, she would have to assist the Master Builder. If she would refuse to assist, it would politically weaken her argument for conservation of the imperiled species. The Librarian reluctantly agreed to assist the Master Builder with his proposal. Her agreement to assist the Master Builder crippled the Didact's support. If the Didact's own wife would work with the Master Builder over him, then it would be safe to assume that she lacked faith in his plan. This amendment to the Master Builder's proposal would nullify the Didact's main complaint against it. With this argument against the Halos now out of the way, the Master Builder systematically and methodically destroyed the Didact's base of support. Eventually, after a long debate, the Forerunner Council sided with Faber's plan. The construction of the Halo array would be allowed to proceed. This did not deter the Didact, who continued to demonstrate the effectiveness of his shield world to counselors. Using the power he gained through his wealth, Faber would weaponize the Forerunner reticles against the Didact. The Didact was found to be in contempt of the Council. His privileges were revoked and he was ordered to submit to the authority of the Master Builder. The Didact refused and chose to exile himself. With the help of the Librarian, the Didact was hidden away in his cryptum for 1,000 years, where he would undertake a meditative exile. After defeating his political rival, the Master Builder would turn his fury onto the Warrior Servant Corps itself. He would take the case to the Council that with the Halo Array, there was no need for Warrior Servants to defend the Ecumene. With no champions from the Warrior Servants to oppose him, the Forerunner Council agreed. The Warrior Servant Corps of the Forerunners was reduced and disbanded. Seeing an opportunity to strengthen his position, the Master Builder created and expanded a new guild of Forerunners. Builder security would form as a protective detail for the Builders. Many former and disgraced warrior servants would fill the ranks of Builder security. Faber became more powerful than ever before, but absolute power can corrupt absolutely, and this time it most certainly did. With no other Forerunner to oppose him, the Master Builder began construction of the Halo Array. The Contender class Ancilla Mendicant Bias would assist the Master Builder with the construction and begin to report directly to him. The first installation would later be known as the Greater Ark. This was the Halo central forging location and would be used to create the 12 Halo installations. This central forging location would be located on the outside of the Milky Way. This was done strategically as it meant the effects of the Halo would not reach the Ark, and thus all the specimens stored there would be protected. To her credit, the Librarian honored her agreement with the Master Builder. The Librarian and her life workers would begin to gather specimens and genetic samples from all across the universe. They would then go to the Ark and prepare the samples for long-term storage. Upon the activation of this array, these samples and specimens would be reseeded all across the Milky Way in an effort to repopulate the galaxy. One by one, the 12 Halo installations were created. This process would take almost 1,000 years. Towards the end of the Halo construction, a series of design flaws were discovered. Some builders in charge of the Halo array's construction found that the Halos were too big. Each Halo measured about 30,000 kilometers in diameter. This immense size made the Halos extremely difficult to transport. Forerunners used a particle reconciliation transport system. Moving objects and ships through this system would create a space-time debt. The enormous size of the Halos created a massive amount of space-time debt when moved. This space-time debt would impact all other forms of Forerunner travel and even Forerunner communications. This debt would also impact the Forerunners' ability to connect to their central information repository, also known as the Domain. This could halt large-scale evacuations and interfere with crucial communication networks. The second major flaw in the Halo's design was its firing mechanism. These 12 Halos could only fire linearly in one direction at a time. They also required time to recharge between firings. This meant that it would be nearly impossible for these Halos to cleanse all life in the galaxy simultaneously. This would give the Flood time to recover and escape. The Master Builder would do everything possible to keep the Forerunner Council from finding out about these flaws. He believed that this sign of weakness in his plan could negatively impact his standing with the Council. To cover up his mistakes, he commissioned the creation of a second, smaller ark on the other side of the galaxy's edge in secret. This arc would become known as the Lesser Arc. It would produce halos that only measured about 10,000 kilometers in diameter. They would also be equipped with a new firing mechanism that could fire in all directions simultaneously. The new halos would be called the Neoteric Halo Array, while the original 12 installations would be called the Senescent Halo Array. These halos would be a vast improvement over the original array, but they would take several hundred years to build, and time grew perilously short. Sometime around the time the Senescent Halo Array was completed, the Flood would make its inevitable return to the Milky Way. The Flood would make landfall on a distant Forerunner world called Seaward. This planet was home to wealthy Forerunners who wanted to live primitive lifestyles free of advanced technology. Due to this lack of advanced technology, these Forerunners had virtually no chance against the infectious parasite. The planet was quickly overwhelmed and consumed by the Flood, which would then begin spreading throughout Forerunner-controlled space. This would lead the Forerunner Council to declare war, and the Forerunner Flood War would begin. To prevent panic, word about this war would not be spread through the Forerunner general population on orders directly from the Council. Though Faber did everything within his power to prevent the knowledge of the flaws of the original Halo Array from reaching the Council, eventually this information would come to light. As Faber predicted, his standing with the Council would begin to diminish. After seeing the Flood's return, and learning that their weapon created as a last resort may be ineffective, the Forerunner Council ordered an immediate test firing of one of the Halos. The Master Builder ordered Mendicant Bias to conduct a test firing in the Jerome Hakor system. The reasons the Master Builder chose this system were never confirmed, but there were several theories. Faber himself would later admit that during the final construction of the Senescent Halo Array, he had a theory that the Halo's radiation could nullify neurophysical architecture. Neurophysical structures were created all throughout the Milky Way galaxy by the Forerunner's creators, the Precursors. It was thought that the Precursors made these structures out of the fabric of the universe itself. These structures would remain as monuments to the Precursors after they passed on. Forerunners never fully understood the inner workings of Precursor structures, and as such, they were not able to tap in or destroy these monstrous structures. They believed that they were indestructible. The Jerome Hakor system was filled with these Precursor structures, and would be the perfect place to test this theory. Even though we learned this theory from the Master Builder himself, this may not be trustworthy. At this point in time, the Master Builder was especially arrogant and egotistical. He would often take credit for the work of other Forerunners. Another theory was that the Master Builder chose this system because Jerome Hakor was the site of the Didact's biggest triumph. He wanted to erase all evidence of the Didact's greatest accomplishments. Whatever the reason, the Master Builder ordered that one of the Halos be moved into the orbit of Jerome Hakor. This movement caused enough time-space debt that the Forerunners lost the ability to connect to the domain. This confirmed one of the array's biggest flaws. Under the orders of the Master Builder, Mendicant Bias fired the installation on a smaller system-wide setting to prevent damage to other systems in the Milky Way. This test firing would reveal some startling results. First, the Master Builder's theory about the Halo's radiation nullifying neurophysical architecture was proven to be true. All of the Precursor structures in the system would dissolve and literally melt away. The second discovery was a creature found in the wreckage of Jerome Hakor. This creature was unlike anything seen in the galaxy. It had multiple sets of arms, a broad, flat head, and a long sea scorpion-like tail. More disturbingly, this creature managed to survive the firing of the Halo Array. Eager to understand how this creature survived, the Master Builder ordered his forces to capture the creature and bring it to the Halo for study. He then ordered Mendicant Bias to interrogate this monstrous creature. This would be seen as Faber's biggest mistake and would lead to the greatest betrayal in Forerunner history. After the Halo's test firing destroyed all the Precursor structures in the Jerome Hakor system, the Master Builder's standing with the Council would plummet. Most Forerunners saw the Precursor structures as eternal monuments to their creators. They saw the Halo's destructions of these structures as sacrilegious. With his power and influence rapidly deteriorating in front of him, the Master Builder would become desperate. Knowing that the Neoteric Array was several hundred years from completion, the Master Builder would have to turn to other means to restore his lost standing. The Master Builder would turn his attention to finding a cure for the Flood. He would order Forerunners stationed on the Halo installations to perform disturbing experiments on human populations stored there. The humans would be taken to various Flood research stations across the Halos. There they would be subjected to experimentation and torture. Most humans taken would either die or succumb to Flood infection. There were a very few that survived these awful experiments, but those who were unfortunate enough to survive would never be the same. The humans that would survive would call these research stations the Palaces of Pain. When Faber ran out of test subjects, he would have his forces gather and bring human populations from the human homeworld of Erde Tyrene, aka Earth, to the Halos. None of these efforts ever resulted in a cure. While the Master Builder performed his sickening experiments, Mendicant Bias continued his interrogation of the monstrous creature found on Jerome Hakor. This creature would become known as the Timeless One. Mendicant would send reports about the interrogation back to the Ark and to the Master Builder. During one of these reports, Mendicant would indicate that it thought that the Timeless One was attempting to corrupt it through some unknown process. The Master Builder would ignore these reports, thinking that Mendicant was too smart to be controlled. This was a fatal mistake. After a 43-year-long interrogation, the Halo containing the Timeless One and Mendicant Bias would go missing and stop reporting to the Master Builder. Fearing that news of a missing Halo would further contribute to his declining standing, the Master Builder did not report it to the Forerunner Council. The Master Builder's desperation would grow. He would travel to Janjaquam, the homeworld of ancient humanity's allies, the Sanchayum. There he hoped to uncover the secrets of the Flood cure from the Sanchayum. Before the Master Builder could arrive in the system, the librarian would visit the system and gather specimens for her conservation measure. Her visit would spark unrest in the Sanchayum. Many of them started to believe that the end of the galaxy was at hand. Upon his arrival to Janjaquam, the Master Builder would not be met by subdued former foes, but would instead be met with a rebellion. The Sanchayum attacked the Master Builder's forces. This was an ill-conceived plan by the Sanchayum, as the Master Builder's security quickly overwhelmed them. The Master Builder captured all of the Sanchayum elders and ordered his forces to devastate the planet with a vicious assault. Sometime during this assault in the Sanchayum quarantine zone, the Master Builder would get word that the Didact had been revived and was now traveling throughout the galaxy. The Didact was attempting to gauge the progress that had been made in his absence. Along with him was a young Forerunner named Bornstellar Makes Eternal Lasting, and 2 human companions. The Master Builder knew that the Didact would eventually travel to Janjaquam to speak with the Sanchayum. Knowing this, the Master Builder laid a perfect trap to capture the Didact and his companions. Just as he planned, the Didact and his team were in fact captured and brought to Janjaquam. The Master Builder would begin an interrogation of his captives. During the interrogation, he would seek out the Flood cure from the Sanchayum elders, but they either did not know about the cure or were unwilling to divulge the information. The Master Builder would then turn his attention to the Didact. He attempted to get the Didact to reveal the failsafe codes for all Contender-class Ancillae. Faber hoped that he could use these failsafe codes to disable Mendicant Bias, but the Didact refused to give up the codes. In a furious rage, the Master Builder locked all of his captives in pain projectors and tortured them until they went unconscious. Furious that his power was diminishing and he was unable to get the answer he was searching for, the Master Builder ordered that the Halo be brought to the system. He then ordered the Halo to be fired. This would eliminate most of the remaining Sanchayum, as well as all other life in the system. The Master Builder would ransom Bornstellar back to his family for an extraordinarily high fee. The 2 human companions were sent to a Halo for research. The Didact would receive the harshest punishment. He would be locked in a derelict ship that was stripped of all weapons and means of defense. This ship would then be sent into a burn, or a portion of the galaxy that was completely controlled by the Flood. The Master Builder's use of a halo in the Sanchayim system was never authorized by the Forerunner Council. It would be the final nail in his coffin politically. In fact, many of the counselors that once supported the Master Builder would resign in protest of his actions. A new council would form. The warrior servant rate of the Forerunners would be restored. The Master Builder was then captured and placed under arrest. He would be put on trial for crimes against the mantle of responsibility and unauthorized use of a strategical weapon. The Master Builder and 11 out of his 12 Halo installations were brought to the Forerunner capital world of Maithrillion. The 12th and final installation was still missing. Along with the trial of the Master Builder, the new Forerunner Council would decide whether the Halo Array was the true and proper solution to the Flood's incursions. Bornstiller would be brought to the capital to stand as a witness at the Master Builder's trial. It was revealed that before the Didact visited Janjaquam, he imprinted a version of his consciousness onto Bornstiller. This in time would blossom within Bornstiller and infuse him with all of the Didact's knowledge, memories, and patterns. This essentially would create a copy of the Didact. The trial would come to an end quickly. During the opening ceremonies, an Ancilla appeared in the amphitheater. This Ancilla would seize control of the Forerunner capital. It would lock all of the Forerunners in their armor and prevent them from defending themselves. It would appear before the Master Builder for a brief moment, and he would immediately recognize his creation. Mendicant Bias had finally returned, but it did not come alone. During all the chaos that would ensue, the 12th and final Halo installation would appear in the Forerunner capital system. The Didact's wisdom within Bornstiller would take control of his body and utter a verbal failsafe code. This code would temporarily disable Mendicant Bias. This would free all of the Forerunners and allow them to mount a defense. In the chaos, the Master Builder's security detail would find him and commandeer a Builder security ship. They would then use it to escape the capital. After the Master Builder left the system, a fierce battle broke out in the Forerunner capital. Mendicant Bias seized control of 5 of the Halo installations and attempted to coordinate a devastating strike in the heart of Forerunner governance. The other 7 Forerunner-controlled Halo installations would attempt to flee using a slipspace portal. Bornstiller would commandeer a ship and use it to escape the system. In the battle that followed their escape, the Forerunners were only able to save 1 of their Halos. The rest were destroyed when the slipspace portal collapsed. Mendicant Bias lost all of its Halos except for its original Rogue Halo installation. In the end, Mendicant Bias fired its extremely damaged Halo installation. The blast killed off all Forerunners that remained in the capital system. Mendicant was then able to escape via a random slipspace jump. This betrayal crippled the Forerunner governing body. Following the attack, the Didact's consciousness inside of Bornstiller would blossom and he would become known as the ISO Didact. Forerunners would reorganize and once more form a new council. This council would appoint the ISO Didact as the protector of the Ecumene. On his first mission, the ISO Didact would recapture the Rogue Halo installation as well as the Timeless one. The ISO Didact would deactivate Mendicant Bias and send its component parts across the Ecumene for further study. During an interrogation with the Timeless one, the ISO Didact would discover that the supposed Flood cure never existed. The Flood willingly retreated, giving the Forerunners the illusion that humanity had found a cure. They did this to make the Forerunners waste time looking for something that simply was an illusion and to keep the Forerunners from exterminating humanity. It would also reveal that the Precursors did not willingly pass the mantle of responsibility or guardianship of the galaxy to the Forerunners. The Forerunners betrayed and revolted against the Precursors. They forcefully took the mantle and hunted down all of the Precursors in a genocidal campaign. In a fit of rage, the ISO Didact executed the Timeless one. The Rogue Halo was repaired, but it was reduced to a 10,000-kilometer installation. It was then sent to a random location to await its use. During this time, Faber and his builder security would retreat to an outlying system to engage in flood defense. Very few Forerunners knew of his survival. Faber was put in charge of Atonement, or a portion of the galaxy that encompassed multiple systems. His forces would then engage in flood defense. In his time in Atonement, Faber would scheme ways to regain his lost power. One of these schemes involved flood research centers. He and his forces would capture and take over several flood research centers. He would turn them into flood decontamination facilities. Using these facilities, Faber and his crew would capture flood-infested ships. They would then put them through inadequate decontamination measures and sell them to warrior servant crews at an extraordinarily high price. Many of these crews would later succumb to undetected flood residues that remained on these ships. It was not uncommon for the Master Builder's team to salvage and recycle the same ship many times. He did this to accumulate more wealth that he hoped he could use to buy his way back into high standing with the Council. Knowing that his political standing was at an all-time low, Faber would wait for the right moment to reveal his survival. While Faber and his crew were extorting Forerunner forces, the Isodidact was busy engaging in large-scale battles with the Flood. Sometime around this time frame, the Flood would gain a new weapon in which they could use to expedite their assaults. Somehow, the Flood found a way to tap into precursor architecture. The structures that Forerunners saw as monuments to their creators began destroying them. These enormous structures could literally destroy an entire battle fleet with ease. They could even wrap themselves around planets and break them into many pieces. With this new weapon, the Flood turned the tide of the war and quickly began to overwhelm the Forerunner forces. In a desperate move, the Isodidact established a Maginot Line defense. Any worlds inside this line would be fiercely defended by the Forerunner forces. Anything outside of this boundary would be left to defend itself. This strategy effectively surrendered 2/3 of Forerunner-controlled space to the Flood. Many Forerunner commanders condemned this strategy and began to lose faith in the Isodidact's leadership. The Master Builder believed that the time of his return was growing near, but he wanted to wait for the right moment. He wanted to return as a last-second savior. In one of his crew's salvage attempts, he would find the last piece of the puzzle he needed. While salvaging a defenseless ship, the Master Builder's crew would find the original Didact. The original Didact, now called the Didact, was sent back to Forerunner-controlled space from the burn. While in the burn, the Didact was subjected to an interrogation and torture by a Flood Central Intelligence which would be called a Gravemind. This interaction with the Gravemind scarred the Didact both mentally and physically, but he was still alive. Surprisingly, the Didact did not show any outward signs of anger towards the Master Builder, even though it was him who ordered him into the burn. Sensing the return of the Didact could win him favor with the new Council, the Master Builder ordered his forces to retreat to the core worlds of the Forerunner Ecumene. Around the time of the Master Builder's return, there was a crisis in Forerunner leadership. The Forerunner commanders completely lost faith in the Isodidact's leadership after he came to the conclusion that the only solution to this war would be the activation of the Halo Array. The Isodidact was forced to step down as protector of the Ecumene. With the Didact's mental state being called into question, the Forerunner Council was forced to make a difficult decision. Hoping to sway the Council further, the Master Builder revealed the existence of the Lesser Ark and the Neoteric Array. The Council begrudgingly appointed the Master Builder as the new protector of the Ecumene. He was charged with the final tasks of organizing Forerunner defense and activating the array. At this point, Flood advances forced all remaining Forerunners to retreat to the Greater Ark. There, next to the Great Halo Foundry, would be the last fully intact senescent Halo installation, Omega Halo. At the Greater Ark, the Forerunner commanders would be called into a conference to plan their final defense. All remaining commanders, including the Isodidact, now going by the name Bornstellar again, would attend this final conference. Before the Master Builder could join the conference, he would have one final confrontation with his old rival, the Didact. Aboard the Didact's restored ship, the Master Builder would be humbled. The Didact would take great pleasure in revealing that the Master Builder's family had been consumed by the flood. All of his wives and children were now a part of a flood grave mind. The Didact would then play a message for the Master Builder. This message would be Faber's family addressing him while being a part of this grave mind. This message completely broke Faber. The gravity of the situation finally hit Faber. The depravity of the flood finally registered in Faber's mind. He finally understood it wasn't him versus the world. He realized that this strategy only led to further conflict. This strategy led to the deaths of everybody he held dear. He realized in order to save the universe from being consumed by this plague, he would need to work with those he once despised. The Master Builder would join the command conference. He would find that many of the commanders wanted him to relinquish command and pass it to the Didact. Before that could happen, a visibly deflated Master Builder would address the commanders. With his haunted gaze, he would recount the events that led them to this dire situation. He would recount the arrogance and the mistakes that led the Forerunners to this last battle. He would then reveal what the Didact had told him about his family. Sorrow filled the room as many Forerunners joined Faber in his grief. The Master Builder would then use their sympathy to rally them to his cause. He would reveal the existence of the Lesser Ark and the 6 new Neoteric Halos. He would then reveal that the halos can nullify neurophysical architecture, and as such, they could destroy the precursor structures that the Flood was using to carve out the heart of the galaxy. Faber would charge Bornsteller with going to the Lesser Ark to disperse and activate this new array. Faber would order all other Forerunner commanders stay behind and defend the Greater Ark. Before this new coordinated effort could begin, the inevitable happened. Sometime after Bornsteller established the Maginot Line, the Flood would capture the research station that housed the component pieces of Mendicant Bias. The Gravemind would reassemble the Rogue Ancilla and put it in charge of coordinating the Flood forces. Using Mendicant's intimate knowledge of the Forerunners, the Flood was able to locate the Greater Ark. The Flood would pull out all the stops to finish off the Forerunners. Using precursor star roads, the Flood surrounded the last bastion of Forerunner safety. In order to escape and reach the Lesser Ark, the Forerunners would need to cut a path through these structures. Fortunately, the Forerunners had one halo that was available for this task. Faber and Bornsteller would travel to Omega Halo. Faber wanted Bornsteller to see Halo's destructive power firsthand before leaving for the Lesser Ark. Faber would prime Omega Halo to fire. Before firing his installation, Faber would speak with all of the remaining Forerunner commanders in Omega Halo's control room. He would state after all this time, he finally understood what a crime against the mantle was, and that he would wait his penance here on Omega Halo. He stated that there would be no need to seek further balance. With that statement, Faber fired Omega Halo. As he predicted, the Halo's radiation cut a path through the precursor star roads. Before it could recharge and fire again, Omega Halo was besieged by precursor star roads from the other side of its firing path. The enormous precursor structures literally ripped the Halo into several pieces. The control center was breached in this assault, and the life of one of the most polarizing Forerunners ended. The Flood used the precursor star roads to literally smash the Greater Ark into pieces. The Master Builder went down with his Omega Halo and gave his life to protect his people. Faber's plan was ultimately a successful one. Bornsteller reached the Lesser Ark. He dispersed the 6 Neoteric Halo installations residing at this Ark. These 6 Halos, along with a 7th, formerly Rogue Halo installation, would be activated. The incredible power of the Halo array would cleanse the Milky Way of all life, and thus the Flood was finally defeated. Thanks to the Librarian, life would once again return to the galaxy. The conservation measure would make sure that live specimens and genetic samples were stored on each of the Halo installations as well as the Ark. Upon the activation of the array, these samples and specimens were released and sent back to their home worlds. This would restore and repopulate the Milky Way into what it is today. It was all possible due to the careful planning of Faber, the master builder. I see Faber's story as a story of redemption. Faber's quest for power led him down a dark path. His cruel acts contributed to many of the events that led to the fall of the Forerunners, but in the end, he realized his mistakes. He sought penance with his final acts and sacrificed himself in an effort to save the galaxy. Faber's efforts were rewarded with the birth of a new galaxy. A galaxy where life would thrive and be unencumbered by the insidious parasite known as the Flood. This is going to complete today's character study of Faber of Will and Might. I hope you guys enjoyed this content. I know this video is quite a bit longer than my normal videos. Please let me know what you think of this video style in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing for more videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.